The girl who defied her family. In the quiet village of Umudike, where tradition ruled and wealth was respected above all else, lived a girl named Amara. She was known for her beauty and fierce spirit. Her almond-shaped eyes held dreams too big for the village, and her laughter was like music in the morning air. Every suitor who came to her father's compound came bearing gifts, bags of rice, goats, and sometimes even cows. But Amara turned them all away. Her father, Chief Nakem, was furious. "Do you think marriage is about love?" he roared one evening. "It is about security, status, and bloodline." Amara didn't answer. She had already given her heart to someone else. His name was Ebuka. He was a quiet young man who lived by the riverside. He wore torn clothes and walked barefoot. People called him the beggar poet, because he always carried a carved piece of wood on which he wrote strange riddles. No one knew where he came from, but the elders whispered that he spoke like someone who had tasted life beyond the village borders. "Why him?" her mother cried one night. "He has nothing, Amara. Not even a hut to call his own." "But he has kindness, Mama," Amara said softly. "And he looks at me like I am a person, not a possession." Word of her forbidden love spread like wildfire. Some villagers called it foolishness. Others said it was witchcraft. Chief Nakem was so ashamed that he declared Amara disowned. "You leave this house and marry that boy," he spat. "You are no longer my daughter." Amara packed her few belongings and walked into Ebuka's arms. They married under the old baobab tree, with only a handful of witnesses, one blind drummer, 2 curious children, and an old widow who had once known the taste of love. There were no gifts, no feasting, no dancing. Only whispered vows and a kiss that tasted of rebellion. But that night, something changed. When they returned to the small abandoned hut Ebuka had prepared for them, Amara sat on the bamboo mat, tired but happy. "At least we are together," she said. Ebuka smiled, then stood up and unwrapped the tattered cloth bag he always carried. Inside was gold, jewels, documents sealed with royal wax, and a ring, heavy and shining, with an unfamiliar crest. Amara gasped. "What is this?" Ebuka looked into her eyes, the light from the lantern dancing across his face. He suddenly seemed different, taller, nobler, mysterious. "I am not who they think I am," he said quietly. "And tonight, you will know everything." The secret prince. Amara stared at the items spread out on the floor, gold coins that shimmered even in the dim light, a scroll tied with velvet ribbon, and the magnificent ring whose gem caught her breath. Her hands trembled as she reached for the scroll, but Ebuka gently stopped her. "Not yet," he said. "Let me explain first." He sat across from her, no longer the ragged young man the village had mocked. There was a new weight to his voice, like someone used to command. The air felt heavier. "My name is not just Ebuka," he began. "It's Prince Ebuka Obiahulu of the Odenigbo kingdom, far beyond the forests that edge this village." Amara's lips parted in disbelief. "A prince? You?" He nodded. "My father was King Is Obiahulu, ruler of 5 great towns. But there was a betrayal in the palace. My uncle, hungry for power, conspired with outsiders. There was a massacre. I escaped only because my mother's maid helped me flee in the dead of night." Amara's heart pounded. "So why hide? Why come here, as a beggar?" Ebuka looked away for a moment, his jaw clenched. "Because I needed to see the world without crowns and titles. I needed to know what people valued, what they feared, what they loved. And most of all, I needed to find someone who would see me, not my throne." Amara sat in stunned silence. Everything she thought she knew had been shattered. The boy who walked barefoot, who composed poems in the sand, who shared roasted maize with her by the riverside, he was a prince. Then why me? She whispered. Ebuka leaned forward. Because when the whole village turned away, you sat beside me. When I had nothing, you gave me everything. You loved me not because of what I had, but despite what I didn't. Tears welled in her eyes. The rejection from her family, the insults from villagers, the loneliness, all of it now felt like a test, a journey towards something greater. But doubt crept into her voice. And now? What happens now? Will you go back and claim your throne? Ebuka looked at the ring in his palm. Not yet. The kingdom is still under my uncle's control. But word has reached me, he is old now, weak. The people are suffering. If I return, I must return not as a prince in hiding, but as a rightful king, with a queen who stood by me when no one else would. Amara's breath caught. You mean? Yes, he said, sliding the ring onto her finger. If you'll stand beside me, Amara, not just as my wife, but as my partner in rebuilding what was lost. The stars outside the hut seemed to shine brighter. The wind carried the drums of distant villages, but inside that small hut, something royal was reborn. Amara took his hand. Then let's do it, together. They did not sleep that night. They planned. Whispers of the throne. By morning, the sun rose over Umudike with its usual calm, but inside the old hut, a storm was stirring. Amara and Ebuka sat cross-legged on the floor, maps drawn on palm leaves spread before them. He sketched the path back to the Odenigbo kingdom, pointing out secret trails, friendly clans, and territories loyal to his late father. We'll need allies, Ebuka said, tapping a small symbol that looked like a lion's head. The warriors of Iroko still remember my father's kindness. If they know I'm alive, they might rise with us. Amara listened intently, nodding, already thinking 2 steps ahead. But what about your uncle? If he learns you're alive, he'll come for you before you even reach the capital. Ebuka smiled. That's why we move in silence. We let the wind carry the rumor before our feet even touch the soil. Just as they were deep in discussion, a knock startled them. It was Mama Neka, the old widow who had witnessed their wedding. Bent with age but eyes sharp as ever, she entered with a knowing smile. I knew there was something strange about you, boy, she said, settling herself on a wooden stool. No beggar carries himself like a lion unless he's tasted royal blood. Ebuka exchanged a glance with Amara. You knew. The old woman nodded slowly. When I was a young girl, I served in the palace of Odenigbo as a kitchen maid. I saw your father once, you have his eyes. Amara leaned forward. Will you help us? Mama Neka chuckled. My dear, I've waited years to see justice return to that land. The people are starving while your uncle feasts. I may be old, but I still know which doors to knock on. And so it began. Over the next few days, messengers were sent, some by foot, others by drumbeat and smoke signal. Word began to spread in hushed voices, the lost prince lives. In the markets of Iroko, in the fishing villages along the river, and in the shadowed huts of exiled warriors, the name Ebuka Obiahulu stirred ancient loyalties. But back in Umudike, danger brewed. Chief Nkem, Amara's father, had heard whispers. One evening, a traveler brought him a strange tale. They say your daughter married a prince in disguise, the man said, sipping palm wine. They say she will return in silk robes, crowned in gold. Chief Nkem's face darkened. She is no daughter of mine. If this is true, she has brought shame, and now, danger. He summoned the village elders and the hunters. If that boy is a threat, we must act before his enemies bring war to our land. Meanwhile, Amara stood by the river, staring into her reflection. Her hands trembled not with fear, but with purpose. She was no longer the girl who had walked away from her family in shame. She was the woman beside a prince. A future queen. Ebuka came to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready?" She turned to him, her eyes steady. More than ever. But neither of them knew, in the dark forests beyond the river, someone else had heard the rumor too. A scout, loyal to the false king. And he was already running to report the truth. The hunt had begun. The spy in the shadows. The jungle paths leading out of Umudike were thick with mist, as if nature itself was trying to hide secrets. Through that mist, a lone scout moved swiftly, ducking under branches and leaping over roots. His name was Kanu, a loyal servant of the false king, Ebuka's uncle, King Okafor. He had heard the whispers with his own ears. The prince lives. The prince is coming. That knowledge alone was dangerous, powerful enough to ignite rebellion if it reached the right people. Kanu had to report back before it was too late. Meanwhile, in the heart of Umudike, preparations were intensifying. Mama Neka had rallied a small group of trusted allies, old men who once served under Ebuka's father, and young boys eager to fight for something greater than the silence they'd grown up in. "We leave at dawn," Ebuka announced to the group. "But we move in two groups. One travels north to rally the warriors of Iroko, the other west to gather provisions and pass the message along." Amara was in the heart of it all. She moved between the groups, organizing food packs, inspecting maps, and keeping spirits high. Though she had never held a sword, her words struck like iron. "You're not just marching for Ebuka," she told them, "you're marching for every child who has gone to bed hungry under a false king." But even as they planned, danger approached. That evening, as the moon climbed high, a young boy named Akena, one of their messengers, returned breathless. "There was a man, by the riverbank, watching you," he panted. "He ran when I got close." Ebuka's face hardened. A spy. Amara's stomach dropped. "If he makes it to Odenigbo, your uncle will know. He'll come with force." Ebuka nodded. "Then we must stop him, before he reaches the borders." Without wasting a second, he summoned 2 swift riders and gave chase. The forest was unforgiving at night, the shadows alive with the sounds of nocturnal beasts and whistling winds. But Ebuka knew the land well. He had lived among the trees when he first escaped years ago. For hours they tracked broken branches and fresh footprints until, at last, they spotted him, Kanu, just as he was about to cross into the territory of the Southern Watch. "Stop!" Ebuka shouted, leaping from his horse and charging. Kanu turned, his eyes wide. It's true. You are alive." Ebuka didn't wait for more words. He tackled the spy to the ground, pinning him with the strength of a man who had lost everything, and was now fighting to regain it. "Who sent you?" Ebuka hissed. Kanu coughed, then smirked. "Your uncle will know, soon enough. Even if I don't return, others have seen. Your secret is no longer safe." That night, they tied the spy and brought him back. Mama Neka wanted him silenced, but Ebuka refused. "We are not like them," he said. "We don't kill messengers. We prepare for war." Back in the hut, Amara sat beside the flickering lantern, writing a letter. It was a declaration, not of war, but of return. To the people of Odenigbo, it read, "Your true king rises from exile. We do not seek blood. We seek justice." And as she sealed the scroll with wax and pressed Ebuka's ring into it, the wind outside howled, not in fear, but in awakening. The throne that trembled. Far from Umudike, Behind towering palace walls carved from red clay and ivory, King Okafor sat restlessly on his throne. His once glorious face now sagged with age and fear. The golden crown on his head weighed heavier with every passing day, not because of its size, but because of the secret he had tried to bury for years. A knock echoed through the grand hall. His chief guard, Captain Duru, entered with urgency. "My king," he said, bowing low. "We have received troubling news." Okafor's eyes narrowed. "Speak." "A scout. From Umudike, he was captured. But before that, others may have seen it too. Rumors are spreading in Iroko, in Yuman, even near the borderlands. They say," he paused, unsure how to continue. "They say what?" The king barked, his voice hoarse. "They say Prince Ebuka lives. And he is gathering men." The hall fell silent. King Okafor's grip tightened on the lion-headed staff. "Lies. He died with the others, burned in the fire." "No, my king. Too many have spoken. They say he carries the royal ring, and the old symbols of Odenigbo. They say, the people are beginning to believe." The king stood, his robes dragging behind him like a serpent's tail. "Belief," he muttered, "is more dangerous than swords." He turned to Duru. "Gather the war council. Send scouts to every southern village. If this boy is alive, I want him brought to me, dead or alive. Preferably dead." Meanwhile, back in Umudike, Ebuka stood before a growing army, not of polished soldiers, but of farmers, hunters, weavers, and drummers. What they lacked in weapons, they made up for in loyalty. Every man and woman who joined him had a story, of loss, of hunger, of injustice suffered under Okafor's rule. Amara, now dressed in a simple but regal blue wrapper, stood beside him as his equal. She had taken charge of the supplies and messengers. Her voice carried authority, her presence inspired trust. The people called her, Ada di Ebube, the daughter of glory. That evening, the couple held a council under the moonlight. Fires blazed, men sharpened spears, and women sang songs of victory yet to come. "We march at sunrise," Ebuka announced. "First to Iroko, then to the heart of Odenigbo." "But they have armies," said a young man from the back. Ebuka nodded. "And we have purpose. We do not fight for power, we fight to give voice to the silenced." Cheers erupted around the fire. But in the shadows beyond the circle, another figure watched, a cloaked rider on horseback, hidden behind trees. She turned her horse silently and rode eastward. She was no ordinary scout. She was Zuri, the king's hidden weapon. Assassin. Spy. And once, she had known Ebuka long ago. Now, she would be sent to destroy him. And though her heart remembered the prince she once loved, her orders were clear: kill him before the kingdom remembers who he truly is. Shadows from the past. Zuri rode like the wind through the forest paths, her black cloak trailing behind her like a ghost. Her face remained unreadable, but inside her chest, a storm brewed. She had not heard the name Ebuka in years, not since the palace fire, not since her heart had been shattered along with the kingdom. She remembered the young prince, kind, curious, full of dreams. He had once promised her a future. But now she served the man who stole that future. King Okafor had raised her after her parents were slain in a village raid. He trained her, molded her into his silent weapon. In return, she gave him loyalty. But loyalty and love were two different beasts. And now both pulled at her from opposite ends. Back in Umudike, Ebuka's army marched quietly at dawn. The forest roads echoed with the soft beat of feet and hooves. Amara led one group, mounted on a horse she had never imagined riding. A girl once mocked for loving a beggar now commanded warriors. As they neared Iroko village, the drums began. Boom, boom, boom. The rhythm of welcome. Old warriors emerged from the trees, spears in hand, but their faces broke into smiles. "You bear your father's walk," said one, gray-bearded and scarred. "And you," he turned to Amara, "you carry a queen's fire." The Iroko warriors joined their march without hesitation. But not all eyes were friendly. That night, as Ebuka stood at the edge of the camp looking at the stars, Zuri stepped out from the shadows, silent as mist. He turned, sensing her presence before she even spoke. His breath caught. "Zuri." Her hood fell back. The firelight danced on her features, still beautiful, still fierce. "It's really you," he whispered. "I came to kill you," she said flatly, her hand on her blade. He didn't move. "Then why haven't you?" She hesitated. He stepped closer. "Because the boy you knew is still here. And I believe the girl I knew still lives in you too." Her eyes flickered. "You don't know what I've done. Who I've become. I don't care," he said. "I only care about what you do now." The forest was still. Even the night birds held their breath. Zuri lowered her blade. "I cannot fight for your crown," she said. "But I will not fight against you either." Ebuka nodded, understanding. "That's enough." But unknown to both, one of King Okafor's hawk scouts had followed Zuri, and he now raced back with a report more dangerous than any weapon. "Ebuka has one Iroko. The assassin failed. The people are rising." In the capital, King Okafor would rage. But in the hearts of the people, hope began to roar. The storm before the rise. News of Ebuka's growing army spread faster than wildfire. Across the plains and into the valleys, farmers laid down their hoes and picked up old spears buried under dusty floors. Fishermen turned their nets into traps for soldiers. Even children whispered the name, Obiahulu, the bringer of peace. In the royal palace, King Okafor's fury shook the walls. His war council stood frozen as he struck down his golden staff on the marble floor. "He wins hearts while we sit on thrones," he roared. "I want fire. I want destruction. If I cannot rule in peace, then I shall rule in ashes." Captain Duru stepped forward cautiously. "My king," our own soldiers whisper his name. "They say he is the son of prophecy, the one who escaped death. If we press too hard, we may spark a full rebellion." Okafor's eyes flamed. "Then let them burn with their rebellion." Meanwhile, in the heart of Iroko village, Ebuka and Amara stood on a raised platform before a growing crowd. Hundreds had gathered, warriors, elders, mothers with babies on their backs, young boys with wooden swords. Amara raised her hand for silence. The crowd hushed. "We did not come to destroy," she said. "We came to restore. The true throne belongs not just to a man, but to a people." Ebuka stepped forward. "The time has come to return to Odenigbo. But we do not go as conquerors, we go as sons and daughters reclaiming their home." Cheers thundered. That night, they set up camp near the great river that marked the edge of the Odenigbo kingdom. The land beyond was enemy territory. As the moon rose, Ebuka and Amara sat by a small fire, staring into the flames. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm thinking about the people I've lost," he replied. "And the ones I may yet lose." She placed a hand on his. "You won't lose me." He looked at her, his voice soft. "I know. But I fear what lies ahead." Before she could answer, a rider galloped into camp, breathless and wide-eyed. It was a messenger from the capital. He dismounted and shouted, "The king has sent out his war drums. Troops are gathering. They plan to attack Iroko before dawn." Ebuka stood immediately. "How far are they?" "Half a day's march. Maybe less." Amara turned to the generals. We must strike first. Ebuka nodded. We go before the sun rises. If they want war, we will meet them at the mouth of the great river. But we will not fight alone. He turned to the crowd. Send word to the mountain clans and the river tribes. Tonight, we call on all who still carry the spirit of Odenigbo. And so, as darkness thickened, torches lit across the camp. Drums beat. Swords were sharpened. A tide of warriors began to move. In the distance, thunder rolled, but it wasn't rain. It was destiny approaching. The battle of the great river. The sun had not yet touched the sky when the first horns blew. Across the river banks, warriors stood in silence, their faces painted with ash and hope. Ebuka rode at the front, the royal ring gleaming on his finger, the ancestral sword of his father strapped to his back. Behind him, Amara stood tall, her blue robe flowing like river water, her eyes sharper than arrows. This was no ordinary army. It was a people awakened. Across the river, the royal troops arrived, hundreds of well-trained soldiers in shining armor, banners bearing the lion of King Okafor fluttering in the wind. At their center, Captain Duru sat upon a black horse, scanning the rebel side. They are many, his lieutenant whispered. But not trained, Duru replied. Still, they fight with heart. He wasn't wrong. As both sides lined up, Ebuka rode forward. He raised his hand and shouted across the waters, his voice echoing through the valley. I am Prince Ebuka, son of the true king, heir to Odenigbo. I seek not blood, but justice. Lay down your arms, and no man shall suffer. For a moment, silence held. Then, from the royal side, one soldier lowered his spear, then another, then 5 more. But Captain Duru raised his sword high. Treachery. Hold the line. A horn blew from the king's side. War began. Spears flew. Arrows screamed. The great river, once a symbol of peace, became the center of chaos. Ebuka charged with his warriors, shouting ancient battle cries. Amara led the second flank, her voice guiding men twice her size. The battle was fierce. Friend fell beside friend. The air filled with dust, blood, and prayers. But then, a sudden twist. From the hills beyond, drums thundered. A third army emerged, mountain warriors, wrapped in red feathers and skins, their leader holding aloft a staff carved with the ancient seal of Odenigbo. They had answered Ebuka's call. The royal troops faltered. Ebuka reached the center, face to face with Captain Duru. The two clashed, steel against steel. The fight was brutal, but Ebuka's will was unbreakable. With one final strike, Duru fell. The remaining soldiers dropped their weapons, surrendering as the sun finally broke through the mist. Victory! Cheers erupted. Warriors cried. Some fell to their knees in disbelief. Amara found Ebuka, bloodied but alive, and wrapped her arms around him. We did it, she whispered. He nodded, breathless. No, they did it. Across the land, word spread fast. The prince had returned. The tyrant's army had fallen. But the throne still waited. And King Okafor, he would not surrender without a final act of vengeance. The lion's last roar. Inside the palace walls of Odenigbo, fear spread like a plague. Servants whispered in corridors. Nobles packed their belongings. Even the palace parrots, once taught to chant, "Long live King Okafor," now sat silently in their cages. In the great throne hall, King Okafor sat alone. His crown tilted, his eyes bloodshot, his robe stained with wine. A messenger entered, trembling. My king, the prince has won at the great river. The people chant his name in the markets. Even the palace guards speak of switching sides. Okafor stood, staggering. They forget who I am. He grabbed a dagger from his belt and stabbed it into the wooden throne arm. I built this kingdom from ash. I gave them order, rule, discipline. He turned to the silent court. And now they turned to a boy and a village girl. Suddenly, the palace doors creaked open. A lone figure entered, Zuri. The king's face twisted. I sent you to kill him. I chose not to, she said simply. You traitor. He hissed. She stepped closer, fearless. I followed you for years. I believed you had vision. But all you ever had was fear. The king laughed bitterly. And you think love will win a kingdom? No, she replied. But truth will. Outside the palace, the gates of Odenigbo opened without resistance. Villagers lined the roads, cheering as Ebuka's army marched in, not as conquerors but as liberators. Drums beat. Flowers rained. Ebuka rode beside Amara, hand in hand. We reach the palace by sunset, he said. And the throne? She asked softly. He looked ahead. If it still stands, we will take it with grace. As they reached the palace square, guards lowered their weapons. Inside, King Okafor watched from the balcony. He could hear the chants, Ebuka. Ebuka. The true king has come. He turned and poured the last of his wine. When Ebuka entered the hall, Okafor stood tall. You came to take my throne. He said. No, Ebuka replied. I came to restore what you stole. Amara stood beside him, calm and radiant. The king smirked. You won the people, the army, the war. But the throne, it demands more than victory. It demands sacrifice. He drew his blade swiftly, pointing it at his own chest. Ebuka stepped forward, but before he could stop him, Okafor drove the blade in. Gasps echoed. Blood pooled. With his final breath, the false king whispered, a lion dies, but its shadow lingers. He fell. The hall fell silent. Ebuka looked around, then slowly climbed the steps. He stood before the golden throne, stared at it for a long moment, then turned to the people. I will sit here, he declared, not as a ruler above, but as a servant among. He took Amara's hand. And she, who never left my side, shall stand as queen, not by blood, but by spirit. Cheers roared. The kingdom had returned to the people. But one chapter still remained.